Okay, the recording has started. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell is a scholar, writer, activist, and humanitarian who is English faculty at Rockland Community College, State University of New York. As a Harlem, New York City native, her work centers on hip hop, American literature, urbanism, comics, popular culture, ethnicity, identity, and subjectivity. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell. I'll turn it over to you. We can't hear you, Dr. Mitchell. I think you might be muted.
There we are. So my apologies. When I have the PowerPoint up, it totally covers up the window for the video session. So I have to do this little teetering back and forth. But let me see if it will begin now. Um, Hopefully you are seeing the first slide on the full screen, comics, culture, and curriculum. Thank you very much.
Wait, Dr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't see your slides yet.
No? Okay. Let me try this again. So it was just sharing, correct?
It was.
Okay. All right. So yeah, even if I minimize the window, it disappears. So let's go back and let's do it again. And you see it, correct?
Yes, we see it now and we hear you.
Okay. And now you have it on full screen, correct?
Um, it doesn't appear on full screen. We could see all of your slides. It's
Really?
as if it isn't in presenting mode, but it's okay the way it is.
Well, it is in presenting mode for me, so that's what's
Okay.
interesting. Because we tested this on Tuesday. Let me see if there is another way. I don't know why. Because on Tuesday, all I did was share, and you saw what I saw, but now, let's see if
I
I
th
can
I
try.
th I think you can share it the way you were sharing it. We would just see your slides on the side. We could see your main slide, but we could see the other slides that come after too.
Yeah, and that's what I wasn't intending, but um, let's just go with it since that's what, let me see. Yeah, there's no other way to do it. So I don't know, again, Murphy's Law is Murphy's Law. Hello, Murphy. But good afternoon. Thank you, Stacy and Dr. Davis, for inviting me to come and talk about comics, culture, and curriculum. I hope all is well at the Community College of Beaver County, and I appreciate you hosting this program. I wanted to hear more about the book that you had been covering. I think you said um, there was an assigned text that students were reading. Is that correct?
Yes, they're reading a book by Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower, and some students
Parable of
are
the Sower. Yeah, I knew it wasn't Kindred. Okay.
mhm. Some students are reading the book itself, and some students are reading the comic version of the book.
Okay. Okay. Um, Octavia Butler is always a fun read, whether it's in prose or whether it's in comics. So I hope it's going well. Um, Definitely, her work has been resurrected through the comics medium, which I think is fantastic. It is an opportunity to introduce readers to these iconic authors and give them more access to those titles. people that may not have typically said that they would like reading science fiction, for example, they now have the opportunity to look at the comics, be enamored with the illustrations, which are fantastic, and then they're also getting this fantastic science fiction story. And Octavia Butler is a legend. Her memory lives on, and we appreciate the fact that people have taken such an interest in her to resurrect her work in the comics format. So, in addition to Parable of the Sower, Kindred is another seminal text of hers that has also been reintroduced to audiences in comics format. So applause to all of you for taking the giant step into the world of comics, particularly as it relates to literature. I am an English professor. That is my training. And literature is one of those things that folks get very protective of. I'll put it that way. And so, what is literature and what is not literature? Too often, comics would get cast aside and not be taken seriously. And really, there has been a push over the past several decades to re-examine the way that comics contribute to literature, contribute to literacy, and then also the ways that it has this other intellectual component outside of just literary studies. And so I might get a chance to touch on some of that today. When we talk about comics and popular culture,
Dr. Mitchell, I'm sorry. Are you intending to share slides? Because we can't see slides.
It's gone again? You don't have it at all?
No,
I
we
didn't
see
even I
you.
didn't even I didn't even touch the share button, and it turned off. I told you that the internet, that something was weird. I will try again and see what happened, but all I did was forward the slide. So here we go. Are you seeing that?
Now we see them. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe it's something to do, there's something wacky going on. I'm going to let the technological hiccups just not disrupt us any further. So I will just proceed as planned. Let me just make sure. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. So when we talk about comics and popular culture, New York Comic Con and San Diego Comic Con are the two most well recognized pop culture events. There are many others. I would say San Diego Comic Con is probably one of the oldest in the United States. Um, it celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2019. And so it has grown exponentially since then. Both New York Comic Con and San Diego Comic Con usually welcome around 250,000 people on average for every comics event. And so those two alone, they generate a lot of tourism, they generate a lot of revenue. And so when we think about comics and pop culture, yes, they're entertaining. Yes, they are educational. Yes, they are accessible, and they are also very big business. The Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable by the American Library Association has done a phenomenal job of programming with libraries, with educators, to introduce comics into curriculum even more. And they often have a visible presence at New York Comic Con and at San Diego Comic Con. There will be educator panels that are sponsored by the ALA. Sometimes they'll be sponsored by other comic studies organizations. And a lot of librarians are especially interested, given the shifts in perspectives about what's appropriate in the classroom and what the new policies are saying about what can and cannot be made available to students. And so, whether you are in a public library or whether you're in a campus library, these are the kinds of political issues that seem to be back in the forefront, and comics are a significant they're significantly affected. One of the books that was banned actually was The New Kid by Jerry Craft, and it's just a graphic novel about a boy who's new in school and deals with some bullying. But this is where I think parents or guardians of younger people in particular are looking for ways to circumvent whatever is going on with school board policies and what's going on with even higher ed policies. There are some states like South Carolina that have even said at the college level that you're not allowed to talk about, certain topics in the classroom, which is interesting, even for like sociology professors and history professors, that they can't talk about it. And so, you know, to think that comics now have become even more pushed to the forefront, especially as some characters have been reimagined and reinvented in ways that were not a part of the traditional iteration of the character. And so you may have some characters that are queer, you have some characters that may have different gender representation, or may have different backgrounds in terms of ethnicity or culture. And there is like the territorialism of like, this is my character. When we think of the ways that people are trying to reimagine and reintroduce and also expand some of that discourse, librarians and educators become central to figuring out ways to get children and young readers and students in general, or the general public, um, access to those texts. And so the reading lists, the recommendations, all of that becomes very helpful for people who are looking either to expand their horizons, or they're looking to find texts that reflect something of their own lived experience, or where they want to understand more about someone else's lived experience. In terms of big business, the global comic book market, it's worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. If you've ever seen Austin Powers, one of my favorite films, the villain is Dr. Evil, and he's always $1 million. Well, in today's global market, we're projecting over $12 billion by 2028. And the global marketplace is expanding. There are more titles that people are getting access to thanks to the internet. And so we can now follow what's happening in Japan, what's happening in South Korea, what's happening in China, what's happening on the markets in South America. They can follow what's going on here and what's going on there. And there are all of these platform sites that you can stream, you can download. It may be pirated. It may not be the best translation sometimes, but fan subs and those have been integral to expanding fan culture. And so one of the things that often happens is you get groups of fans that will say, oh, we'll translate this in the subtitles into our language. And until someone does it, it's not available. And you go to certain sites and you can open up their comics, or you can open up their animations. And if they have fan bases, there will be people that usually will translate and post the scans. And so this is how it gets to outside markets. And it is phenomenal if you think about the amount of crowd sharing efforts that are required for things like fan subbing. And I relied very heavily on fan subbing until Amazon came along, or Barnes and Noble expanded its horizons. There was no way to get access to some of the material because it wasn't in any bookstore. And unless you could read it in the original language it was written in, you had to wait for the English translation. So fan subs have done a tremendous job of helping to keep the fandom going in their own like regional linguistic communities. And so if you're not familiar with fan subs, just know that sometimes you will find that there are some popular titles that are trending on these fan sub websites. And until the contract is done, that book is not going to be available for purchase in the language you want to read it in, um, until that's done. And so fan subs are the only way to go. And now there are numerous fan sub websites, but once upon a time, there were only, a handful that you could rely on to not send you a virus on your computer as you're downloading and streaming either the animation episodes or the comics chapters. And now it's an industry unto itself. um, Salam Fandom is the initiative that I started. It's been, wow, it's been about 5 years now. And my initiative with Salam Fandom, as part of the fandom world, was to and is to heighten visibility of Muslim creators and Muslim fans. So people don't know who's doing what in the industry. And it is often a very isolating experience. There is a very large fandom culture throughout the different Muslim communities in the United States and throughout the world. There are Comic Cons on so many different major city schedules. Saudi Arabia has a Comic Con, Bahrain has a Comic Con, Egypt has a Comic Con, Indonesia has a very large fandom community and is the largest, I think, Muslim population in the world is in Indonesia. You will find there's a Comic Con in Malaysia. There's one in Nigeria. Comic Con is everywhere. And so my contribution, I created this when I was invited by the United States Embassy um, to go to the Comic Con in Algeria, and that was in 2019. It's called the FIBDA, which is French for Festival International of Bande Dessinée. Um, and it is a comics festival, and they celebrate many artists from their local communities and then international artists. And so in 2019, the United States was the honored country. And so a delegation of us was invited out to share our work, do some workshops. It was a delightful experience. And so with that, Salam Fandom gained an international following. Um, we had a lot of fun uh, working with children in the local classrooms, showing them how to tell a story. They got to read certain things, plus everyone got to talk about their favorite superheroes. And that brings me on to the next part of this presentation, which is comics are not just superheroes. So one of the things about Algeria, having had colonialism experience through France, France is one of the premier countries for comics. And bande dessinée, the French way to say comics, is an integral part of the culture. It isn't just something that is superheroes. It isn't something that's just for kids or just, the quote, um, funny pages that you would have in a newspaper at the back pages of the newspaper. I don't know how many of you have read a newspaper, but that's where you would see the funny pages. Because it is so integrated into their society, people are doing comics about everything, and it's starting to become more of a norm in the United States. Outside of the United States, in other countries, for example, like Japan, they know comics are not just superheroes, but in our culture, superheroes is a part of the way that comics have become a mainstay. However, there are other kinds of comics formats other than superhero stories. So this 2019 Forbes article about how the shift is occurring from superheroes to other kinds of comics is still an ongoing issue. And if you think about comic strips like Charlie Brown, so if you've heard of Charlie Brown, that is not a superhero comic, but it is a comic. And so Charlie Brown is a part of the American comics landscape in the same way that Garfield is a part of the American comics landscape. Dick Tracy is another established part of the American comics landscape. And my fandom in comics originated with comic strips and not with superheroes. I like superheroes. I've always enjoyed, a good fantastical tale, but comic strips are my first comics love. And I am delighted to see that comic strips are still continuing in the digital format, particularly on social media, whether it's the gag cartoons, whether it's the comic strips that are a one off versus telling a story over a period of strips. I'm seeing a lot more happening with that. And for me, if you're going to talk about, being a comics fan and, superheroes is all you've got, that's fine. As I look at my Green Lantern button above my camera. But I can also tell you that, yes, comic strips are probably where you want to start if you're looking at comics history in the United States. You want to start with your political cartoon, you want to start with your comic strips. And political cartoons are still fairly significant in terms of learning about not just the political history of a thing, but also the ways in which it was perceived and portrayed to readers. So, one of the things to note is that as literacy rates were so very low, pictures becomes the one way that you can get the news out without having to worry about whether people can read the story. And so the importance of cartoons as it relates to news and media is that people who had limited literacy could still find out what was going on. Even if there was a minimal caption, the pictures would tell them what's going on and can evoke sentiment, whether it's humor, whether it's anger, whether it's curiosity. Um, the political cartoons become significant. And if you ever are curious about some of the political cartoons in the United States history, you can go all the way back to the American Civil War and see what political statements people were making in their cartoons that were published in the newspaper. And absolutely, not everybody felt the same way about the war. And every other major event that has happened, whether it was the Great Depression, whether it was a drought, whether it was getting statehood, immigration policies, you name it, there's a political cartoon in some United States newspapers somewhere about it. So when we think about the different genres, the different topics, Yes, superheroes, people in tights with extraordinary powers are a part of the pop culture mainstay. But you also have mystery, you have epics, you have the slice of life, you have memoir and autobiography, you have history. STEM topics are also very popular. And then also, if you want to learn another language, it is a good way to do so. When we think about comics and literacy, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud is probably one of the seminal texts that's in your library holdings. It was one of the most widely recognized and accessible, and I think one of the first really mass marketed comics studies publications. Since then, there are so many, but whether it is Comics is ABC, How We Read, Making Comics, and then the visual language of comics, which is semiotic studies, you can get comics information about curriculum development, about literary theory, um, for younger students, for early learning education, and for the graduate students and everyone in between. And so what we have now is a much broader reading list that we can have access to. So these are just some of the ones that are very popular, but there are a host of others. In terms of the literary attributes, we'll get into the ways that comic can tell a story. But in terms of the literacy attributes, we know it has been documented for many years now that reluctant readers or people who struggle with reading and reading comprehension tend to gravitate towards comics. And comics then become a gateway for reading enjoyment. Students get attached to characters, they get caught up in plot analysis, they expand their vocabulary. I've actually met people who were learning American English. They immigrated from other countries and said that they learned American English from reading the comics. And so, whether it's your comic strip or whether it's a comic book, there are many ways that people have access to learn language and then also to get interested in a story. As a visual narrative, it's fairly sophisticated. And we can't forget that in one picture, there can be a lot of things going on that we need to unpack and analyze. And so and then you develop the language around that in terms of the dialogue. There are specific technical aspects of comics. And then also, you're critically analyzing what's going on. The same story that is being illustrated by one artist, you may not gravitate towards it the same way you do when another artist draws that same character. And people do get caught into preferences about story arcs or about different iterations. Which Earth is this character on? Um, and being able to keep track of all those details is a lot of work. And so when we think that comics do not allow for that kind of intellectual development, it's a big mistake. Many people that are really serious devotees to a certain character or a certain story world, they can tell you all of the intricacies of every character, every part of that story world in terms of regions, in terms of different groups of characters. They can tell you about all of the nuances of the way a character has evolved. It is an ongoing process in which people do write back and say that they like the chapter, didn't like this particular strip, and then they provide their own input. When it gets to be beyond the scope of, say, copyright, you'll have something like Manga Shakespeare, which you should see on the top left of your screen. Manga Shakespeare has a life unto itself. There are many different Shakespeare stories, all of the plays that you can imagine that are told in comics format. and how many students would rather read the manga version, which is the Japanese comics version. Manga is the Japanese word for comics. And so they'd rather read the manga version instead of reading all of the lines with all of the numbers in Elizabethan English. They would rather see it updated and made more accessible. And if the key is accessibility, if the focus is accessibility, then it would be helpful if instructors, educators, guardians are receptive to that. And so the same student who doesn't want to sit and read the play, Romeo and Juliet, will get through the manga in an afternoon. And that tells you, and they're getting the same information, they're getting all the same characters, they're getting all the same plot devices, but this is the way that they prefer it be told. Rather, a student read the manga than watch the film, which may leave out a variety of things in the play. And manga tend to be, a couple hundred pages long. So, they can figure out, if they're going to do a volume 1 or volume 2. But definitely, it is a platform. You can look up manga Shakespeare and find them in your own campus library or in your own local public library. And for me, getting people interested in reading keeps me employed, both as a comics educator, as an educator in English and composition and literature, and then also as a working professional in the comics industry. I need people to want to read things so that I have projects to contribute to. We also have Cells at Work. If you have not seen Cells at Work, if you have not come across Cells at Work, you must take a look at Cells at Work. It is brilliantly done and teaches like anatomy and physiology. And so what you see are, you see a character who's wearing red, and that is a red blood cell. And then you have your white blood cell, who is the very aggressive looking character, because white blood cells are supposed to protect you. And then you have a host of other characters. And so Cells at Work is a manga series that then became an animation. You can find it on Netflix, and you can find it on other streaming platforms. The animation stopped at a certain point, but the manga continued past that. And so if you want to learn about how infections affect the internal organs, if you want to learn about how the body heals itself or when it's immunocompromised, and this is all prior to COVID. If you want to learn about, what happens when someone is afflicted with disease, they have a chapter or a couple of chapters that'll tell you exactly what's happening on the inside, or what should be happening on the inside when those things occur, and how our system functions. If you are into biography, then definitely the late, great John Lewis had March Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, and then Run. Both, I think, are award-winning series. Run, I believe there's only Book 1 that's out right now. But it is a phenomenal accounting and visual narrative on his life and career working as a civil rights advocate, and as a pioneer, and then also as a legislator. Learning maths, 1 plus 1, square root of 144, you name it. There are maths related topics, maybe an episode in a particular comic where they're learning maths. And so comics teach the language of mathematics is another one. And then reading with pictures is very popular. If you haven't come across it yet, you can find it almost anywhere. It does give a lot of information about the value of language arts, which tells you it's about younger readers, but also about the ways that you can integrate it as educational material. And again, there are comics under every kind of topic you can think of. So, science, film studies, that's filmish. Um, philosophy, philosophy 101, anyone? Well, the cartoon introduction to philosophy. Are you in a culinary arts class? Because Cook Korean is a delightful comic. It is a comic book all about cooking Korean recipes. There are comic books on knitting, statistics. The only class I ever withdrew from, ever in my academic career, ever, that I can remember, was Stats 402. I don't know how many of you took statistics, but I had to withdraw. And if I had the cartoon guide to statistics, maybe it would have been helpful. I tried, people, but it wasn't working. And I also, being a literature person, maths is a unique uh, hindrance for me. And so I need all the help I can get. Um, Physics, teaching physics, learning physics, the physics of superheroes is a very popular book. And then Laugh and Learn in Spanish using the comic strip For Better or For Worse, which was a comic strip that I used to enjoy very great immensely when it was in the newspapers and I was a regular newspaper reader. Um, for Better or For Worse was one of the ones that I gravitated towards. I thought it was a very cute and funny family comic, but I would say one of my favorite ones was The Far Side by Larson, and I believe Larson came back a couple of years ago after taking this hiatus and is now back to doing all the weird, quirky things that make me laugh. When we think about what you can make a comic about, you can make a comic about anything. And so this is where I tell you anyone can be a part of the creative process. You don't have to be able to draw. You can be an illustrator. You can be a writer. You can do editorial work, which is what I do in addition to writing. You can be on the marketing side. You can be on the design side. And then, of course, there's media, there's public relations, communications. It isn't just about who can draw. Who can draw is great, but you still got to tell a good story. And if you don't have good characters and you're not developing a good story world, you're not going to have a good story. It's not just explosions and, fight scenes. You've got to get people connected. And so you can be a part of that industry um, through a variety of different channels. Even if you're just a reviewer, we don't say just a reviewer. You can be a reviewer and tap into all the latest stuff and build your network reviewing things, whether it's, the strips that are out, whether it's new series that are debuting, comic books that are debuting. There are many different avenues in the industry of comics, but most people automatically just think you have to be able to draw. And I am not proficient in drawing at all. And things have been very busy for me working as a comics professional. And so I am here to tell you that yes, you can have a career doing what you love in a creative capacity and not have to be able to draw anything. Um, of course, for people who do write and draw, there may be a sense of autonomy and ownership, but they normally are still working with other people to make the project as good as it can be and to get it out. So I encourage you to think about collaborating with classmates, think about your friends. The only one who can tell the story the way that you want to tell the story is you. And if you don't see something out there, then that means it's waiting for you to do it. So don't fret about, some of the typical concerns people usually have are, well, I want to get a job at Marvel or I want to draw at DC. Yes, they're the big two, but you also have indie comics, which is where I'm very active. And then even still, when you think about some of the intricacies of working at a place like Marvel or DC, as I, am well acquainted with many people who work at Marvel in DC. One of the things is those are not your characters. Usually, you are just drawing a character that was already inherited as part of the pantheon, right? And so, if you want to tell your story, you came up with a character and you came up with a story world, and you want to go and pitch it. Well, you know, um, indie sometimes is the way to go because there's more flexibility. You say, hey, let's make a comic book. Okay, great. Let's see how it goes. And if you get the right people to support and to contribute, then what you have is a tremendous opportunity to expand the horizon even further. But if you say, my dream is to draw Iron Man or Superman or, Catwoman, well, you can just keep campaigning and applying and see whether or not you get picked up. But um, there are ways to still have a very viable career in the comics industry. Don't limit yourself to saying, like, if it's not Marvel or DC, it's not valid. Well, there's a lot more than Marvel and DC in the comics industry, and they're making money and they are getting a lot of readers and getting a lot of fans. And so you can do it in a variety of ways, but you have to be willing to think outside of the standard status quo. These are some of the comic strips and political cartoons that Wizard of Vid is a favorite of mine. And this is from April 9th, 2004. I was very much so in grad school. I was in my second year of my doctoral program when I saw this, and it always makes me laugh. I thought they were talking about me and my classmates. So it says, forsooth, an equestrian approacheth on yonder steed, which exhibiteth much froth. And of course, the king says, who's in the watchtower? And his assistant says, some out of work English professor. And it is hilarious for me. It depends on your sense of humor. Again, I'm a comic strip person. And what I loved most about this one is it's one of my favorite strips. This particular one is one of my favorite strips because it is also talking about what I learned when I started grad school, which is there are a lot of English people with not enough English jobs. And so we were prepared early on. They said, it's great that you want to go to grad school, but we have to be realistic about the job market. And so here we have, what is happening on a national scale. Still, even today, they'll say, English jobs are few and far between. You have way more people with degrees in English than you have jobs for people that want to teach English. And so an out of work English professor, uh, again, I was in my second year of graduate study for my doctorate. I already had my master's. And, when I was thinking, like, what am I doing this for? And then I read this, I said, there's the rub, right? A Shakespearean reference. Hedgeye it's an economic publication. And so Rich usually does these really cool cartoons about economics, whether it's bull markets or people um, having trade wars or something. And so this one was the national debt. And when I teach college writing one, and we're talking about economic inequality and personal finance and financial literacy, this is actually one of the comic strips that I use. And so Hedgeye, if you're not familiar with it, they have fantastic economics related comics and cartoons. And then from 1882, 1882, right? So this is post Civil War, time of Reconstruction, and we have the Chinese Exclusion Act. And so this was in a newspaper. And as it says, the Golden Gate of Liberty, except for people from China. And it says, notice, communist, nihilist, socialist, Fenian, and hoodlum uh, welcome, but no admittance to Chinamen. And then you see the American flag on the back. And then you can also see the bag that says industry. And then there is behind him, it says peace and sobriety. And then the caption, I will try to read this for you. The enlightened person says, uh, we must draw the line somewhere. So, who gets access into the United States and the American platform and who doesn't? This is from the Library of Congress. You can find a color version of it. People have since updated it, and the color version is also circulating widely. But if you do a Google search for the Chinese Exclusion Act cartoon, political cartoon, this will be one of the ones that you see. When we think about politics, you have your social and civic politics, right? Your economic politics. You also have your personal politics. So when we think about comics and culture, Huda Fahmy has done a brilliant job with Yes, I'm Hot in This. And she does comic strips. And her comic strips are usually 4 panel comics. And it is just about her everyday life and some of the things that she's experiencing or that she has experienced as a Muslim woman who wears the veil in a traditional way. And so I am a Muslim woman who veils differently. And when I had the Salam fandom panel in 2019 at San Diego Comic Con, Huda was on that panel. And I was already a big fan of hers, and this book had just come out. She has since published other books. Um, I think there are 2 more books that have come out since 2019. And so I love it when I see people growing and thriving, but her stuff is funny and you can find her on the internet. I think she has a very active Instagram account. I don't know about her Twitter account as much. But Yes, I'm Hot in This is one of those texts that if you are curious to hear from Muslim voices or voices that aren't often given the opportunity to be voiced themselves, you would want to check out just a couple of her comic strips and you get a chance to see. But again, it's like very slice of life and also the humor that she finds in just everyday living. The Life with the Ahmad family, I got a chance to spotlight them when I had a Salam fandom panel at New York Comic Con. I think it was maybe in 2018. And this one is about eavesdropping. And it's funny. And so they try to teach different religious ideals while also entertaining and enlightening. And so comics and culture is everywhere. There's Afrocentric, which is a satirical comic strip that has been going on for, I want to say, about 7 years now. It's Juliana Jules Smith. She is the writer, and then she has her team of illustrators. And there are several characters that go to a certain college, Ronald Reagan University, and it deals with the characters who are mixed race. they're half white, half black, as is Jules herself. And then what it means to be on campus and dealing with people and meeting people with different political and ideological perspectives. That's what it means to usually be in college and be at a university. And so Afrocentric, it's like, well, not really Afrocentric, but then very Afrocentric. And also about performative identity. And so this particular strip is about the ways that people are exploring identity, but the way that it also can, become a little cliche. And then there is uh, this one about self-esteem and mental health. And so it's relating to social media and the comments section. And Afrocentric also has a very funny strip about the comments section. You have major self-esteem issues. I highly recommend that you immediately disable commenting on your blog. And so he was at the therapist's office, and um, it's not working out online. So when we think about comics and culture, it can be sobering at times. It can also be that humor is an entryway to discuss difficult topics like cyberbullying, right? Or about, the appropriate manners like eavesdropping. So my question to you, how would you tell your story? The Unlazy comic that you see on the top left of your screen, that is from a comics uh, creator, Savannah Zambrano. She has a series called Unlazy, and she was a panelist on my comics program back in 2013. I can't believe it's been almost 10 years since we had that first comics panel discussion on my campus. And we had so many students and so many faculty and staff, and it was delightful to see everyone come and get curious and learn. And so she drew me in that third panel. That was like the outfit I was wearing. And so Savannah, she does this slice of life piece called Unlazy. And you can find Unlazy still online. We have this one political, it's a cartoon about inflation. Our nest egg has been poached. Again, you can make a comic that's going to teach people about something. You can make a comic that's going to just express some of your perspective on what happened that day. A Bitter Root just won the Eisner. I was That was just in July at the San Diego Comic-Con. They won the Eisner, and that is a Harlem Renaissance story series. If you're not familiar with Bitterroot, you can check it out. I plan to be integrating it into my curriculum, especially maybe in the summer. I got to give it some time. And then Kakeguri is on Netflix. It's an anime series about gambling, and that it's this private school that students have to gamble in order to survive. It's not about how good their grades are. It's all about how they handle gambling. And so this is a page from that manga volume. And if you have been following Kakeguri, you know that we are all waiting to see what's going to happen next. High school was never so interesting until you start talking about what's happening with manga and anime characters. Um, some recent projects that I've been involved in are Joystick Angels and Okami's Dark History with Ray Comics. And then with Unstoppable Comics, we have right now a Kickstarter for Vicky Sticks, which I'm going to show you. And then my new projects, these are some of them, with Wink Magazine, and then Queen Amani Renes, which is teaching about this ancient Nubian queen who ruled for 30 years. Vicky Sticks is currently in Kickstarter format, and has 7 more days to go to get the money it needs to come out. And if you're into the macabre, then Vicky Sticks might be for you. New York versus the World is a zombie series. So I always encourage people to support your local comic book shop. And as you can see, I've been busy. I heard where was it? This is, hold on. I'm trying to, I heard a ding. I don't know. I know I'm done. I'm done, but I can't get back to the chat window. So if someone posted in the chat, by all means, um,
It
oh, there we are. There we are. I got you. So if there are any questions or comments, we've come to that portion of the program.
If you have any
Did I hear a voice? I thought I heard someone, but then I don't hear anyone now.
it was just me. I was suggesting they post questions in
Oh,
the chat.
okay. Okay. So then my question to the audience is, what are you a fan of? What's your fandom? Are you a Star Trek person? Are you a comic strip person? Are you reading manga or watching anime? Are you into cosplay, Doctor Who? Um, what is your fandom? Bugs Bunny, Ben 10, I don't know. What is the fandom that you are a part of?
I think some of our audience are probably new to comic books. Can you suggest a good starting place for individuals who are new to comics?
Depending on what it is that you're interested in, there are numerous options. In terms of the fandom piece, remember, comics can be anything. It can be Charlie Brown comic strips. It can be science fiction. It can be Star Trek or Star Wars. It can be a range of things. And so there are people who very much so are loyal to Star Wars, don't really read comic books. They're part of the fandom just as much as people who like video games. Video games are also a part of the fandom. Lord of the Rings, oh, they have a serious following. That's fantasy. You have folks that are very into Game of Thrones. That is another fandom that has been going on. The Witcher has a big fandom. Stranger Things has a huge fandom. When we think about fandom, it could be zombies. You know how many people were into um, any of those zombie series that were out. It wasn't just you know, the vampire stuff, but the werewolf stuff, um, the macabre, you know, the folklore that's attached to it. It was definitely something to see how many people, I was surprised how many people were obsessed with zombies. I didn't know until I went to Comic Con. I did not know that there was this zombie world that people were in. And you know, when the television show you know, was doing very well, you know, you name that series, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I never watched one episode. It is a cult classic for people. There are a variety of different fandoms that are out there. So I see that some people have posted that they're into science fiction or other stuff. Gaming, tabletop games, video games, those are all a part of fandoms too. Whether it's a game that you play on your phone or whether it's a game that requires a console. When we think about the options, I would say check out Squire. Um, Squire just won the Harvey Award at New York Comic Con, and one of the co-creators, Sada Alfagi, was on my Salam fandom panel back in 2019. I met her, yes, because I met her at C2E2, which is a comics event. It's the Chicago Comics Entertainment Expo. And I had met her in February of 2019 at C2E2 and said, hey, I'm doing a Salon Fandom panel at New York Comic Con. Hopefully, if I do it, are you available? She said, sure. You know, we had our, you know, exchange of information. She's on the panel. I'm fresh from Algeria. I'm a little jet lagged. Seta's on the panel and she says, I am working on a book called Squire, and it's set to come out in 2022, and we'll see how it goes. And the next time I see Sarah in real life, because COVID and the pandemic, she is the award winning, Harvey Award winning. Um, it is such a blessing to be able to see that come to fruition because I remember when it was still in the early stages and they had just announced that this book was going to be coming out. And now here it is. The next time she's on the panel, she had just won the award that night, the night before. So um, you never know where those opportunities are going to lie, and you have to be open and available. But Squire is a fantastic story about a girl who wants to be a squire. And I got through this in an afternoon. It is such an amazing story. The artwork is beautiful. Sarah is an illustrator. She has phenomenal talent. If you don't have it in your library, you want to get it in your library because it's really good. And Sarah loves drawing girls with swords. And so this is the first of many more to come. And this is not, as far as I know, I don't know that there's a Squire Volume 2 or whatever coming. I think this is it. If they are going to continue the series, I am here for it. I'm here for all the things. But Squire is a very successful project. And then she also was the co-creator of Amulet, one of the characters in the Miss Marvel series. So if people are new to comics and comic strips, definitely find your comic strips in your local publications. You can also go to um, Go Comics and you will find them there. Go Comics is a great way to look through archives. You can find the very established comics like the Boondocks. You can also find, I think they have like Marmaduke. Um, you can also find some lesser known comic strips that have gotten syndication and see what people were writing about. You can go back in the archive, I think, to the 1980s or 1990s. So it's not just current material that's out. You can also look at um, material from the past. I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to go here. And then you can see, so this is the Go Comics website, and you see everything from The Far Side, which I love, Larson, but you can also see Calvin and Hobbes, another one that I was a very regular reader of Calvin and Hobbes, and then some other ones that are there. Heart of the City by Steens um, is also, doing very well. Steens is doing very well. Um, and then you even see something like La Cucaracha. So the Breaking Cat News, Crabgrass, and then there are others. So when you look here, you can see the trending comics, political cartoons, web comics. If you aren't sure, you can definitely find what you're looking for here. And I would encourage everybody who is into comic strips in particular, this is probably one of the more useful sites to have access to find the material you're looking for. I teach Calvin and Hobbes in some of my classes, and the students are thoroughly amused by this little boy and his imaginary friend. But on that note, thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful and informative. And thank you again, Professor Freeman. And I think Dr. Davis just stepped away or is in transit. But thank you very much, Community College of Beaver County, for being able to have this conversation. I hope that if you are curious, that this has sparked an interest and has been helpful. And if you have any questions, you can always inquire with Professor Freeman, who will forward your inquiry to me if I can be of any assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell. That was a phenomenal presentation.
Thank you. I had to cut stuff out. I think I told you I can do fandom all day. If you want to talk about Hello Kitty, I can talk about Hello Kitty until, we're up to her next anniversary. But yes, if there are any questions, by all means, please let me know and I'll be happy to help or guide that person to find the answers they're looking for.
Thank you, and I'll certainly forward any inquiries to you.
Yeah, for sure. Usually art students are looking for internships. Usually there's those kinds of very tangible questions of, I need an internship. How can I get an internship? If you're looking for an internship at a major comics company, well, they have their own process. But if you're looking to get your feet wet in the industry, by all means, you may want to think about the indie route and get experienced with professional experience, get some professional experience in the comics industry before you jump over to Hollywood. But everyone starts somewhere, so whatever the questions are, if someone's curious about curriculum development or anything, just let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. It has been a pleasure, but I am signing off.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell, and thank you for everyone who joined us today.
Thank you very much for everyone who joined, and be well.